I know what some of you are probably thinking right now. Why did I only choose the peaceful aspects of nature to emphasize God? I'm with you. Because other aspects of nature are ugly and disgusting. Like this. This is a cat eating a mouse. This is Darwinian evolution. It's gross and disgusting, but it's not wrong. My intention with emphasizing nature as a spiritual concept is to represent Darwinian evolution, a truth about the world upon which all other truths stand. But again, I know what you're thinking, where does God come into this? Well, for now, let me toss the word God out for a second, because so many, including myself, shudder with antipathy toward the word, because that word suffocates under lifetimes of theocratic baggage. So maybe we could change the word to being, and we can move back to the ugly side of nature. But if you can allow me to expand on why I think that nature, in all of its forms, shines a kind of truth onto all of us, I would really appreciate that. And how does it do that? Well, because nature is as it is. When I refer to nature, I am using it as metaphor and a bit more for being. Because yes, I fully acknowledge that tsunamis cause tremendous devastation and undeserved suffering to countless people. Nature is chaotic. But what I'm saying is that at a fundamental level, everything is nature. Humans and animals are just as much nature as nature. Because everything that is, meaning everything that is sentient, is a product of Darwinian evolution. They are all products of nature. So I'm just going to say a bunch of obvious things, which is that every living being is governed by the same laws. We all live by those laws and die by those laws. And within those laws are truths. But in particular, and at the peak of our evolutionary timeline, are behavioral truths and different paths of meaning which exist and are real. So by God, do I mean the creator of the universe who made the world 6,000 years ago? No. Do I just mean creator, or the thing that lit the Big Bang? I don't know. In fact, I don't think it's possible for me to know any of those things. And because I don't think it's possible for me to know those things, I find it difficult to believe in an omnipresent being that watches over me and everyone else at all times. But I also think that if there were a creator who influences our decisions, it could be possible that our minds are not equipped enough to fully comprehend or even begin to understand something like that. I suppose this is where a kind of faith enters into some people's experience. They take this question mark and put God in its space. And I used to recoil at that idea. I used to think it was a cop-out for religious nonsense. But I'm just saying that maybe within our universe there are things that are impossible to know, and that within that space, maybe there is a God-like thing. Now, if you think that's silly, I'm with you. But let's look at the first verse of the Tao. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The Tao is both named and nameless. As nameless, it is the origin of all things. As named, it is the mother of 10,000 things. Ever desireless, one can see the mystery. Ever desiring, one sees only the manifestations. And the mystery itself is the doorway to all understanding. Lao Tzu is saying that to describe the indescribable is to lose its meaning. It's really missing the point, which is why it's so hard to do what I'm trying to do. But this verse alone really fuels my newfound attitude and openness to religious truths, because I see profound benefits in a humble agnosticism. But I also don't want this view to be mistaken as a pejorative punch to atheists. I think many atheists hold some of the most powerful views of our time. And I see nothing wrong with a person adhering to an empirical, rationalist worldview. In fact, when I say that out loud, it doesn't really make sense to criticize an empirical, rational worldview. And as for atheism, that's simply just a lack of belief in God. Nothing else has to be attached to that. Okay, so why have I dropped it? Because for me, atheism, well, a particular kind of atheism, an identity and intellectual atheism in which anyone else who believed in God is delusional, this is where I was, turned me into a fatalistic, nihilistic person. When I saw the world this way, nothing meant anything. But I'm also not saying that I am going this direction because atheism was so bad for me. I'm actually going this direction toward religious truth because it makes more sense to me.
And there's also a big difference between explaining and explaining away. So, well, Dennett likes to explain away things, like consciousness, you know, and you can't explain away consciousness. Well, you can. It depends on how you structure your initial presumptions about the world. You know, so the logos that we were talking about earlier, that's associated with, let's say, articulated truth and the communication of articulated truth, that's basically the prime function of consciousness. And the Judeo-Christian story is predicated on the idea that that is a fundamental element of being. And of course, being is different than material reality. So, and these things aren't grappled with properly by positivistic scientists who have no real training in philosophy and who know nothing at all about religion. The Christianity that Dawkins criticizes is the Christianity that a smart 13-year-old boy objects to.
Certain aspects of religion mean something to me now. And I also think it's important to understand what I mean by meaning and just how important that word is for me in my life now. Meaning, the way that I'm using it, is discovering truths or sufficient truths that propel me and every other sentient being forward toward more fulfillment and happiness and joy. And what is meaningful may not necessarily be factual, but it is nonetheless true. And in my view, an agnostic attitude fits perfectly into this worldview, a particular kind of agnosticism, one that is open and receptive, even willing to embrace religious concepts and ideas. But this worldview does not also mean that I entertain the obvious hiccups and compulsive narcissism from religious people. I'm also not excusing the vast amount of barbarism in scripture or the words used against homosexuality or women. So God, if we can attempt to reuse the word, it just means the highest truths in our consciousness, which is to say it is finding out what these truths are and then allowing ourselves to be guided and propelled by them. So the question now becomes, who do we look to for this guidance? Is there any person who represents the best states of being? Well, yes, Jesus. Now, I have antipathy to that name as well. I also used to think that Jesus never existed due to his life being mirrored by so many other gods like Horus and Osiris, who were also born of a virgin and had 12 disciples and many other of the exact same characteristics that Jesus had. But I don't think of Jesus or Osiris or Horus as gods who may have lived on Earth, although, according to many historians, Jesus certainly may have. But this is missing the point. It's his message and his truths, which have been passed down for thousands of years, that deserve merit in today's modern world. The Buddha likewise holds equally valuable truths that are of fundamental importance to all of us. So am I saying that I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? Yes and no. At least not in the way you might think. I have a personal relationship with Jesus the same way I have a personal relationship with his truths. By mimicking Jesus, his spirit, meaning his ideas and his modes of being, exist in me and through me. Same with the Buddha. The same nature that existed in him exists in me, and by mirroring these attributes, his spirit, meaning his ideas and his modes of being, exist in me and through me. So in a profound sense, these religious figures are very real. Their truths are just as real as you or me, because their truths exist in consciousness, and we are all consciousness. So if I find, or attempt to find, my highest truth, which in this context is the truth that leads me away from suffering and further toward happiness and fulfillment, I will have located a space of consciousness where the wisest people who have ever lived have guided me into, and I will be that space, just as they are that space. And finding out how to do this, and recognizing how meaningful this process is what so many of the religious arcs and allegory represent. To find these truths is to find God, and to exist as these truths is to be God.